What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button, and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
At the very end of the 2000s, Renault decided to stop experimenting with five-door flagship cars and present to replace the outgoing Velsadis to replace the outgoing Velsadis. The recipe was made so simple that the basis of the model was based on the platform from the People's Renault Laguna, which in Russia People's, however, also did not become. Of course, the platform has been improved, wheelbase has been increased on modest 6mm, and the rear torsion beam has been replaced by multi-lever. Moreover, the total overall length of the body was almost 4.9 meters, that is, Latitude surpassed the size of many competitors from D-Class and formally reached the higher E-Class. The world premiere of Latitude took place in Moscow at MMAS 2010, and sales started in the same year. They showed that the trick with large dimensions was not too successful. First, the wheelbase of the sedan was inferior to many competitors, including Camry and Mondeo. And secondly, the driving habits turned out to be dull, especially taking into account the fact that only two junior gasoline engines were presented in our country. In 2013, the sedan received a restyling, which reached us only by 2014. But it did not affect the situation. The Russian sales amounted to hundreds of cars a year. As well as Koleo's Latitude was of Korean origin and initially came to us from the plant in Busan, and its localization established in 2012 at Moscow of Toframos was also doomed to failure. The strong point was the prices. With larger dimensions, Latitude was about 100,000 cheaper than competitors like Mondeo. At the start of sales in 2010, the price list started at about 800,000, and the top version with V6 could be bought for less than 1.2 million. By the restyling, the base price tag went up to 1 million, and in 2015 the price fork was from 1.1 to 1.5 million rubles, which was still not a bad offer. But the lack of striking features and the extinction of the class of large sedans left Latitude an exclusive on our roads. It is also quite rare on the secondary market. At the moment of writing the material, there were only 39 cars for sale on Avito, and 35 of them pre-restyling. Let's find out whether it is worth chasing restyling and whether it is difficult to buy and maintain this sedan at all. The age of 7 to 12 years is still not critical for these cars, and most of the cars are maintained in decent condition. Bodywork problems are mostly minor and typical: chipping on the wheel arch edges, surface corrosion in the arch cavities, rust spots on the hood, and defects on the front edge of the roof. There will also be corrosion on the underbody, but it is usually limited to superficial problems, especially at the rear and at the subframe and suspension mounting points. A really massive and chronic affliction is corrosion of the trunk lid. Rust there traditionally originates under the plastic molding, but if you do not open the hearth and do not repaint everything at the first signs, the lid rusts extensively from the outside and inside, up to the impossibility of quality repair. By the way, the repair also rarely helps for a long time. The first cases of repainting occurred a year after the purchase of a new car, and since then many owners repainted the trunk 2 to 4 times. Another problem area is the door center pillars, which rust under the glossy plastic covers. By the time the corrosion crawls outward, there may already be a large hotspot inside, and the attachment holes of the overlays allow rust inside the strut. However, repairs are generally not that difficult or expensive. And in general, the chances to meet Latitude, restored after a serious accident, are extremely small. Now we will explain why. If to keep the body in good condition is not a difficult task, then to repair it cheaply after an accident is almost impossible. On the face of it, the Latitude is by no means an exclusive car, even compared to the Velsadis, but it is difficult to find body parts. Almost everything exists only in the original version, costs a lot, and is offered only under order with delivery time from 2 weeks to 2 months. For example, the front bumper costs from 55 to 60,000, front wing 25 to 35,000, and the price range for the hood is even greater, from 50 to 90,000. Headlights are also in short supply, both basic halogen and optional bi-xenon. Even the first variant will cost 30 to 60,000, and the price tag for a xenon headlight will be 75 to 100,000. Fortunately, for the windshield there are piece-cheap analogs for $10,000, the original will cost 3 to 4 times more. However, this is a clear exception. Almost any body repair can turn into a protracted and not cheap event. And you can't count on local dismantling shops. There are very few cars in Russia, and they are dismantled quickly, so to save money, you will have to master ordering spare parts from abroad. As we remember, the French-Japanese Platform D, on which Latitude is built, allows you to vary the design of suspensions, so in front of the sedan inherited the McPherson from Laguna, and at the back received a multi-lever, as in Nissan Tina. A spoon of tar in all this unification is the fact that formerly much iron here is still its own. But, fortunately, it does not mean that here, as with the body, you will have to buy only original parts. For example, the front L-shaped lever is not unified with Laguna, but the original costs about $10,000 and non-original from 4 to 12. The ball bearing is fastened on rivets and is changed together with a lever, but in sale there are repair supports on bolts at the price of 5,000 rubles. Stabilizer struts are not unique, so instead of the original for 3,000 you can buy substitutes from 800 rubles. The hub bearing in front is changed in assembly with the hub, and the range of prices for a non-original new unit is very wide, from 3 to 12,000. At the back it is pressed into the brake disc according to the French fashion. But the assortment of shock absorbers is scarce. Actually there are several variants from large manufacturers like Monroe and KYB. For 12 to 18,000 per unit, but it is still better than to pay 30 to 35,000 for the original. You can buy a rear shock absorber for 4 to 8,000 instead of 15 to 17,000 too. But the situation with rear levers is more complicated. For example, the upper lever is only original and costs 25 to 35,000, and silent blocks are not offered as standard. The situation with the lower lever is similar, and even a simple extension brakes of a large and rather heavy sedan are not simple. Single piston disc mechanisms with a floating bracket around the circle. The diameter of front discs is 296 mm, though the heaviest 3-liter diesel cars, which we don't have, used larger 320 mm brakes. At the rear, in any case, unventilated discs with a diameter of 300 mm. Prices for front discs are quite usual. Non-original starts from 3,000, and for 5 to 6,000 you can buy a part from a large manufacturer. But the rear disc can cost from 4 to 25,000, depending on the manufacturer and the presence of a hub bearing. So it is worth checking not only the suspension at the back. Replacement of brake discs with bearings can be more expensive than it seems. Steering control differs depending on a motor. 2-liter versions have electro-hydraulic amplifier, as on Laguna, and on cars with V6, usual hydraulics with pump drive by a belt. Accordingly, Latitude on V6 is not only a little bit faster, but also feels better in corners and turns out to be cheaper in maintenance. It is necessary to change oil in any case, but the usual pump of hydraulic system can be bought for 8 to 12,000, an electric one will cost 60 to 65,000 for the restored unit. The restored rack in any case will cost about 50 to 60,000, so you can look for options of its reassembly. It may be cheaper. In our market, the French have completely abandoned manual transmissions for the flagship sedan. However, there was still a choice of transmission type. Latitude with a 4-cylinder engine was equipped with a variator, and with a V6 engine was combined with a classic 6-speed automatic. Variator FK0 is well-known JF011E, quite a good unit by class standards. It is quite strong and simple, and with good maintenance is able to pass 200,000 kilometers. However, if you do not change oil once in 40,000, neglect warming up and drive aggressively, the resource can be halved. The good news is that Latitude was not bought by drivers. Quiet automobile with acceleration up to 112 seconds usually attracted quiet audience. But economy on service is quite probable, so it is necessary to believe only documented data. The 6-speed automatic JF613E is familiar from many other models, including the Nissan X-Trail Murano. It has a higher potential service life, up to 250 to 300,000 kilometers before the override. Of course, warming up and regular oil changes are necessary for it, but it is easier to endure slippages and cold weather, and its potential life is higher, up to 250 to 300,000 kilometers before overhaul. However, the torque converter lock-in linings will wear out earlier, so the box will have to be opened for the first time at about 200,000 kilometers, and many owners have already done it. Latitude and its Korean counterpart Samsung SM5 had enough motors in the world, 3 petrol and diesel engines each, with 3 and 3.5-liter V6s at the top of the range. We got only 2 junior gasoline motors from the list. However, it does not mean that the situation is bad. Basic 2-liter M4R, giving out 144 horsepower, one of the most reliable motors Renault in principle. Cast iron liners in an aluminum block, chain timing with a good resource, distributed injection, there is nothing complicated in it. Except that the phase regulator on the inlet camshaft will sooner or later require 20 to 25,000 rubles, yes, chain timing will cost a little more expensive than belt timing, well, and the need to adjust the valves should not be forgotten. But in general, this motor, especially taking into account the capacity of up to 150 horsepower, is a choice of a calm and economical driver. However, with V6 also you can't chase much. Latitude with it turns out to be faster only for a second, gaining a hundredth a little less than in 11 seconds. Structurally, it has similarities with the inline of 4. There is also aluminum block with cast iron liners and timing drive by chain. The resource is also very good, the same 300,000 kilometers are quite achievable. However, sometimes the catalytic converter is an obstacle on the way to this mark, so when buying it is better to spend on endoscopy of cylinders. In addition, lodged rings can lead to an increase in oil consumption. The problem can often be solved by Reskiksovka, but it is certain that only replacement of rings will help. So a full can of oil in the B. Considering all the technicalities of the Latitude, it can be said that the choice between the two possible options can be left to the buyer's taste. Both motors are good, and opting for the more reliable hydromechanical automatic means overpaying for fuel and transport tax, which can be important for frugal buyers. So those who want Renault's largest sedan, but spend no more on fuel than the Fluence, you can look for a well-maintained variant. With mileage up to 150,000 kilometers from the first or second owner, about like this. Well, those who are ready to pay a little extra can prefer a variant with V6 and automatic, getting richer equipment. There are still copies like this one on the market. Mileage and condition inspire optimism. And if Autoteca will confirm the mileage and accident-free history, and endoscopy will not reveal defects, Latitude can become an imperceptible but not bad alternative even for Toyota Camry. The main thing is not to try to prove it to someone. In conclusion, the Renault Latitude, priced at 900,000 rubles, presents a compelling option for those seeking a reliable vehicle with good motors and exclusive spare parts. While it may not be the most popular choice on the market, its unique features and solid performance can make it a worthwhile investment for the right buyer. Ultimately, it comes down to personal preference and priorities. If you value comfort, distinctive design, and the assurance of quality parts, the Renault Latitude could be a smart addition to your garage. Thank you for watching, and we hope this analysis helps you make an informed decision.